Barbara Olson is a prominent legal commentator. We're now told by a number of their friends that she was on board the plane and called him from a cell phone saying, "We're being hijacked. Do you believe this?" And then the cell phone went dead. I think NBC's Tim Russert is standing by in Washington. He is not there now. At any rate, a number of their political friends on Capitol Hill and within the Washington establishment have been stunned by this news today. Barbara Olson was a very familiar figure on MSNBC and in conservative commentary circles. Her husband is a highly regarded lawyer. He was not on the plane. He is the Solicitor General of the United States. There was some small dispute over his confirmation, but then that was worked out quickly after George W. Bush took office. But you'll recall Barbara Olson was a bright, outspoken, extremely articulate and passionate defender of her causes with a keen sense of humor as well, and apparently she was on the plane and managed to get off a cell phone call to her husband. So our deepest sympathy, obviously, to the Olson family and to all those other families who had family members on the plane. We've also been told today that a man by the name of David Angel, who was the executive producer of Frasier, one of the most popular of the NBC television series, and his family were scheduled to return to Los Angeles from Cape Cod on the American Airlines flight that was hijacked and used in the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. This from his brother. So we are beginning to get now, unfortunately, but it's inevitable, the names and the count of the people who have died. Former President Clinton, who led the nation through the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, urged Americans today to rally behind President Bush in the aftermath of Tuesday's terrorist attack. He said, "We should not be second-guessing. We should be supporting him," he said in a telephone interview while traveling to Australia. He was stunned by what he saw, going on to say the most important thing is we ought to be strong, calm, good Americans now and rally behind the president and support the actions that he doubtlessly will take in the days ahead in both rescue and reconstruction of the area, and especially in investigating and taking whatever action is necessary against those responsible. That according to President Clinton, who is traveling today in... let's go to Ken Aller. Now, Ken, just let me share with you something today. The Arab governments have uniformly condemned these attacks, and we have to be careful that there is a line of separation between these groups often and the governments who do try to act in responsible fashion.
Well, Tom, you know, as I said a moment ago, the thing that I think is probably very much in the United States' interest here is its reaction abroad to what has happened. There is never going to be such a thing as a silver lining in all these clouds. The most that you can hope for, though, is the fact that we can now begin to lead an international consensus against this kind of thing, and that involves making some very intelligent distinctions. We are not at war with the Islamic world or the Arab world in any sense at all. We are at war with a very narrow band of fanatical terrorists, and we need to keep those distinctions very firmly in our mind, because we're going to need the help of countries like Jordan. You had the ambassador on, also the ambassador from Egypt a couple of moments ago. Those are precisely the countries that we need the most to be along with us in whatever it is that we have to go do. I think the critical thing, though, is that from here on out, it's going to include the full range of American military power as well as diplomatic, as well as justice.
Thank you very much, Ken Allard. And we also want to remind everyone that we ought not to engage in stereotypical attacks or jump to conclusions. The Council on American Islamic Relations is sending out an email calling on all Muslims to offer assistance to victims of the attack while at the same time encouraging precautions for followers of the faith. This is part of what they said. They said those who wear Islamic attire should consider staying out of public areas for the immediate future. They request additional police patrols in the vicinity of mosques, of which there are many in America. Post mosque members at entrances and parking areas during prayer. Report suspicious packages to police. Document descriptions of suspicious people or vehicles. There are an estimated 7 million Muslims in America and some 1.2 billion worldwide. Islam, of course, is the fastest growing religion in the world. You'll recall that right after Oklahoma City, all the conclusions were that it was an Islamic terrorist of some kind. It was a homegrown American, Timothy McVeigh, with help of other American veterans of military service, for that matter. Mr. McVeigh now has gone to his just reward And today we can only assume that this was a much more sophisticated terrorist attack. And because it is the Trade Center, which had been attacked before, most people are concluding that it did come from one of the more radical Islamic terrorist organizations, or terrorist organizations with or without the word Islamic. This is a live picture of Manhattan, looking across the harbor now at the lower end of the financial district. Until 9:42 this morning, you would see the gleaming twin towers of the World Trade Center. And then they were attacked, and within a few hours, they went down. We're now told that President Bush is scheduled to leave Offutt, the Strategic Air Command headquarters, shortly for an undisclosed location. That's according to the press pool that does travel with the president. It travels in the back of Air Force One, the 747. That's been set up. There's another angle on the collapse of the trade towers. However many times you may look at it, it still boggles the mind. Belief is suspended, thinking, could this have happened? Was it some kind of a graphics animation of some kind? But we are living through a day, the 11th of September, 2001, that we will be dealing with for a good long time in our lives, and our children will be dealing with it as well in history books, if not in their own lives. Any number of people have pointed out that the 11th of September in shorthand is 9/11, and 9/11 was overtaxed today across this country in so many ways. Now, according to the press pool, Air Force One is headed back for the nation's capital. The president will be returning to Washington, D.C. It is important that business go on as best it can from our institutions of governance, so that terrorists don't have the impression that they're putting this government on the run in some fashion. Amy Baker was in the World Trade Center when Bakehurst. Amy, are you there?
Yes, I'm right here. It's
Go ahead.
Hello?
Tell me your last name.
Dakers, like Bakers, but D. Dakers.
Okay. Where were you?
I was in the 99th floor. In the 2 building.
In the 2 building. Was that was the first one hit?
No, the first. No, the 1 building was hit first.
Right.
And then after the all building got hit.
When the first one got hit and you were just next door, what did you think?
I got so scared that my heart started beating so fast that everybody in our department just ran down the stairs.
Who did you work for?
A&R Services of New York. It's an insurance company.
And were you able to get all the way down 99 floors and out of the building before your building was hit as well?
No, we was on the 65th floor when our building got hit.
And what happened then? Were you in the stairwell?
Yes, we was in the staircase. Yes, we was.
And what did you think when the building got hit?
Oh my gosh, everybody got scared. Everybody got scared. We were all praying to God that we would make it out in time. We were all praying, and we just kept moving. We just kept running down the stairs. So we got out like in a nick of time.
And was it terribly crowded? And was there smoke?
Yes, it was. Oh yes, it was.
Water in the stairwell as well from the sprinklers?
Well, I didn't see no water because we were just running down the stairs, running on. The staircase was packed with people. We were just running down the stairs.
And when you got down and got out, what did you do then?
Well, they told us that they showed us exactly where to walk. So I was on Fulton Street, and then a few minutes later, we just started running because the whole building collapsed after that. The whole building just came right down. So, and the smoke was so intense that we was running. We ran all the way to the Brooklyn Bridge, just to get away from the smoke.
And what did you think when you turned around and saw the building coming down?
I said, oh my God, all those people in there. We were screaming. Everybody that was in there, we were screaming, oh my God, we made it up, but all those people in there, we was crying. All those people in there. You know, it shook us up so bad. It shook us up.
What about your friends and the people that you know that work in the building? Were they all able to get out, Amy?
Well, the people in my department, I think everyone made it out safe, but I don't know about the rest of them. I mean, you know, I'm worried about them because I don't know if they made it safe or oh God, or if they died or what. I don't even know.
Where are you now, Amy?
I'm home, but it's like I'm in my bed because my whole body is just shaking. My whole body is shaking. It's like I can't even move. It's just shaking.
Well, Amy, we're awfully glad that you're okay, and we thank you for sharing this terrifying story with us today. And we hope that your friends are going to all be okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Okay. That's a very vivid account of what so many people went through, and as she indicated, there were so many people left in the building when it came down. Bob Bazell telling us the chilling story of a nurse online with her husband who was still in the building, and then the building came down. There were people in wheelchairs. CNBC's Ron Insana was down in the area when the building came down itself, and even those who were in the immediate surrounding area were in great peril, Ron.
Absolutely, Tom. The billowing smoke that rushed through the streets of Manhattan really enveloped several of us who were trying to get around the World Trade Center and go down to the west side to hook up with NBC and CNBC crews. And it was so enveloping that the air around us turned jet black. You could not see. As I told you earlier in the day, I had the good fortune to find an unlocked car which I was hiding behind, really, to get away from the blowing winds. And as it got darker and darker, I crawled in and stayed there for several minutes until you could see some light again, and then managed to get inside a building as well and connected with a couple of police officers and some others. That video that you look at right now, in some ways does phenomenal justice to what it looked like, but as it's chasing you down the street, there's really no way to describe the feeling that you have trying to get away from the falling debris and the smoke and all the other materials that were flying through the air.
Were you able to breathe during that 2-minute period when it was just pitch black and the air was thick with smoke?
Luckily, the car that I was leaning against and kind of hiding behind was open, and I jumped in as soon as I could. It was very difficult breathing, and it was getting reasonably hot inside the car for lack of air. I don't believe that it was life-threatening, but it sure felt that way. I mean, there was no way to know what was going to happen next. We couldn't tell the trajectory of the building as it began to implode. We didn't know if it would fall on the surrounding buildings or just simply come straight down as it ultimately did. And you didn't know what was next. It was dark. It was impossible to see. Here, there's really no communication with anybody else for 3 or 4 minutes. And inside the building, it was certainly calmer, but again, people were panicked there as well.
All right, thank you very much. CNBC's Ron Insana. In the Middle East today, the Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres was scheduled to meet with Yasser Arafat. Obviously, that meeting was called off. Yasser Arafat has condemned this attack in the United States in the strongest possible terms, and Foreign Minister Shimon Peres joins us now from the NBC Bureau in Tel Aviv. Has your government been in touch with President Bush, Mr. Peres?
No, we were in touch with the American ambassador. We have offered to send our rescue group, which is very trained on it. As a matter of fact, they're already on their way. You know, all of us feel today like being an American. Your pain is our pain, and we can imagine what's going over in the country. But it is the United States, again, that can again save the humanity. One of the greatest dangers to civilization, to our future. It's an attempt to bring us in a jungle where people will not be able to walk or to fly or to feel free. And I think there are ways and means to handle this challenge. And there is nobody better equipped, in spite of all the agonies, than the United States to lead again the world to become a more civilized and safer place.
Mr. Peres, there are going to be so many people who are worried that this act of war, and it is nothing less than this, on the United States will only have a polarizing effect, that it will not be in any way a means to get countries together and right-thinking people in all of the world, including in your very volatile part of the world, to come to some common agreement against terrorism.
I don't think so. I think that the ones among the Arabs who are engaged in terror will today understand that this is the end of the story. They cannot go ahead with it. And I think the world has to get itself organized with the leadership of the United States to identify countries or organizations which are hosting or supporting or financing this terrible form of terror. I think also leaders, religious leaders, spiritual leaders, newspapermen, political figures have to condemn with a full heart the appearance of suicidal murders, which really cause the same damage like in Pearl Harbor. They shouldn't be permitted. It's against the gospel. It's against everything we stand for. And I see it as a world struggle that concerns each of us individually, and I believe we can manage and handle it, no matter if you're an Arab or a Jew or an American.
And what about the conduct of the Israeli government in its continuing conflict with the PLO and with Yasser Arafat? Is that going to be changed as a result of all of this?
That's my hope. We are telling today the Arabs and the Palestinians, look, today it's the chance to depart from terror completely and fully and go back to the district of negotiations, of understanding. Nothing will be solved by weapons and killings, and everything that was solved in the past and may be solved in the future is around the negotiating table.
Have you had any contact with Chairman Arafat today or with his representatives?
What I'm telling you, we let them know as well.
Has there been any rescheduling of the meeting that you were supposed to have today with the chairman?
Not yet, but first of all, let us see what will happen. I hope the Palestinians will use this terrible occasion in order to free from themselves from the mistake of being engaged in acts of terror and destruction.
Shimon Peres, the foreign minister of Israel, a man who's been prominent in that country's leadership, regardless of the government, for so many years. Thank you very much for being with us here today.
Thank you.
Foreign Minister of Israel, who was scheduled to meet today with Yasser Arafat. To bring you back up to date on a couple of matters, President Bush en route from Omaha, Nebraska, Offutt Air Force Base, which is south of Omaha, the Strategic Air Command headquarters, after a National Security Council meeting via teleconferencing. He's now en route back to Washington, D.C. The president was in Florida this morning for an education and literacy event. When Andy Card whispered in his ear that there had been a second attack on the World Trade Center, he issued a strong statement, then left there, flew to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, from there to Offutt. Let's listen for just a moment to what the president had to say today.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with...
That's President George W. Bush, who was speaking at that time from Louisiana. Then he went on to Omaha, and he's now on his way back to Washington, D.C. His counselor, Karen Hughes, speaking from the FBI, said that all of the federal agencies had their ongoing operations plans in effect, and the government was performing as best could be expected under the circumstances. Banks did stay open today, even though the financial markets were shut down here in New York City. The Cabinet Secretary for Transportation, Norm Mineta of California, had moved to the command center at the White House with Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice, who was the National Security Advisor, because obviously transportation was such a critical component of all of this, with 4 airplanes hijacked today. All air travel canceled until tomorrow. No more takeoffs from any airports until noon tomorrow. All other flights did arrive safely. A number of international flights that were headed this way were diverted, either going back to their original destination or their point of origin, or they were sent to other places. There was one report that the border between the United States and Mexico had been closed today. It turns out that there was just enhanced security at that airport. The border for a time between Canada and the United States near Windsor, Ontario, just across the river from Detroit, that was closed today as well. There was a great deal of confusion. Precaution was the order of the day until they could sort out what was real, what was rumored, what was likely to happen next. It all happened within about an hour this morning, between 8:45 Eastern Time and about 9:45, the attack on the Twin Towers of the Trade Center, the Pentagon, and then the plane that was crashed into the ground outside of Pittsburgh. We don't know what its original destination or target may have been. 266 people on board these airliners today, including Barbara Olson, a prominent commentator from Washington, D.C., the wife of the Solicitor General of the United States, Ted Olson, who made the successful argument for President Bush before the U.S. Supreme Court. There is Barbara Olson, a very familiar figure on political talk shows and also a writer in Washington. They were one of the sparkling couples in Republican circles, great lovers of the opera, loved to give good dinner parties, and they were the bright lights in the Bush administration's social life, as well as being two highly skilled lawyers. Barbara Olson was on the plane that was crashed into the Pentagon. She managed to get a cell phone call off to her husband, and then the line went dead after she said, "Can you believe this? We're being hijacked." I'm sure that no one on those planes thought that they were going to be not only hijacked, but used in effect as a guided missile, a different kind of a cruise missile, to attack the institutions of governance that they have defended in the past. We're looking now at New York City, earlier photos of what was going on in the lower part of Manhattan, awaiting the president's return to Washington, D.C., and where he will be going. There's a 40-story building that is near the Trade Center that is in danger of collapsing as well because of the shock of the explosion that was coincidental with the two towers coming down. 40 fire companies, we're told, are in the immediate area. Well, there were 40 fire companies in the immediate Trade Center area just before the towers collapsed. The great fear is that many of those of New York's finest were lost in that debris and all that rubble and the force of that explosion. Pat Dawson, downtown. Pat, can you bring us up to date on the emergency efforts that are underway?
Well, at this point, Tom, literally hundreds of rescue workers are waiting to go in there. The problem for the authorities here, of course, is when can you send them in there? We are told by Port Authority officials that they are unable to send people actually into the debris of the building. However, they do have people on the perimeter, on the along the sides of the building, and they've been able to look there. There are still fires burning in there. We were told by somebody that was down there a little while ago that there were still fires burning in some areas of those buildings. Now, as we stand here, probably a good 6 to 7 hours after the buildings came down. Obviously a very, very difficult circumstance and a big challenge for rescue officials here as to exactly when to go in there. As we discussed earlier, the problem that they have, of course, is when can they go in to search for survivors and yet still not put the rescuers themselves, many of whom, no doubt, from earlier this morning are casualties of the first events of the day, not put those rescue workers into danger themselves. So that is obviously the problem. We were told by a couple of people that were in there before rescue workers that there are bodies, a number of bodies lying around in the debris and on the street there. Obviously, part of the job will be to bring them out. We are also told by Port Authority officials that the building over there, which is building number 7, which you can see, it is referred to as building number 7. It's about, I would say probably a 20-story building, that there is some concern on the part of Port Authority officials about the stability of that building at this point. So obviously, as we have been discussing all day, a very, very difficult circumstance here as to exactly when that area really is going to be truly secure. Tom?
All right, Pat Dawson, I want to bring everybody up to date on a kind of a national roundup because while the specific targets were in Washington, D.C. and in New York City, it did have a devastating effect around this country. In terms of transportation, you know that all airports were shut down nationwide. They will remain shut down until noon tomorrow. Also, all vessels on navigable waters are under command of the Secretary of Transportation. Greyhound canceled all bus service in the Northeast. Amtrak temporarily suspended train service along the Northeastern Corridor. Sections of the U.S. section of the St. Lawrence Seaway were closed. Manhattan subway lines, most of them were shut down. There was later service, limited service so people could get out of the lower part of Manhattan. Security for Great Lakes shipping tightened. Coast Guard inspecting ships at St. Mary's River, which links Lake Huron and Lake Superior. Flat tops aircraft carriers were moved from the waters off Virginia up into the New York area. The tunnel between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario was closed to car traffic. Security tightened at all U.S.-Canada border crossings. Ports of entry along the U.S.-Mexico border remain open, but there's a high security alert. Space shuttle operations were halted in Florida. 12,000 employees at the Space Center were sent home. Non-essential personnel from the Naval Weapons Station Center in Goose Creek, South Carolina, evacuated. 1,700 workers at the Space and Naval Warfare Systems sent home. Oklahoma police created a one-block perimeter around the jail where the bombing conspirator Terry Nichols has been housed and is awaiting trial with the possibility of facing the death sentence on state charges. As you know, all financial markets in New York City were closed down, including the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, and the Chicago Board of Trade, although most banks remained open today. Heightened monitoring at all bridges and dams, including Grand Coulee and Hoover Dam. At the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, heightened security. The UN building was evacuated. General Motors gave its 6,000 employees the day off in Detroit. Ford Motor Company closed world headquarters in Dearborn. The Internal Revenue Service in Michigan closed down. Sears Tower in Chicago shut down. The 51-story IDS Center in Minneapolis shut down. New York City's mayoral primary, which was scheduled for today, was postponed. All Major League Baseball games were postponed today. Walt Disney World in Florida was shut down. Philadelphia, the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall were closed. Space Needle in Seattle closed and evacuated. Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York closed. And a number of entertainment and theme parks in California were closed, as well as the New Mexico State Fair. That's just what we know about what was going on around the country. Obviously, a lot of people were glued to their television sets or listening to radio or dealing with this national crisis in one form or another. Let's go to NBC's Dan Abrams now. Dan, what do you have for us? Dan Abrams, are you there?
Tom, can you hear me?
Yes.
I am here. Okay. As you can see, Tom, behind me, the smoke still billowing from the area where the Trade Center was. There's still concern about a building right there where there is a fire still going, and the police here still concerned that that building, too, may be in jeopardy. They continue to push the crowds back. A block, another block, another block. They remain concerned that that building could fall as well. They're concerned about the way the wind has been moving. I'm joined now by Sergeant Moses Cruz from the New York City Police Department, who was there during both of the buildings falling. Describe, first of all, what you saw when the first building fell.
Well, I heard the rumbling. I looked up, and then I saw the top of the building just collapsing down.
And immediately, what did you do? I mean, you're a New York City police officer. You're seeing the World Trade Center coming down. What did you do?
Well, first reaction was, oh God. In other words, though. Then I turned around and started yelling for people to run.
And as you're telling people to run, shortly thereafter, the second building then comes down.
That was half an hour later.
Half an hour later.
The initial collapse was we started running, then the smoke caught up to me. As you can see, everything's just... Actually, I'm clean now compared to what I was before. And then you couldn't really breathe. You couldn't see anything.
And what was the most important thing you were trying to get people to do? It was just leave?
Yeah, just run. Get out of the way.
And were most of the people running in a pretty orderly fashion?
Oh, yeah, they were running, but then the smoke that caught up to them, a lot of people were collapsing. They were having trouble breathing.
But there were people collapsing literally on the ground in front of the building?
Yeah, actually, I was like a block away, so they were actually collapsing as they were trying to run.
Okay. Well, Sergeant Cruz, thanks very much for joining us. We appreciate it. And we appreciate all the work you're doing there. Tom, there are triage centers set up here on both sides. I'm sort of in the middle area. On both to the east and the west of me, there are triage centers. And in fact, there's one place where a school bus has been converted into an ICU. So, Tom, as you can see, the issues continue here. More people coming in and coming out. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Dan Abrams. We're coming up now on about 8 hours since that first attack that stunned everyone on the World Trade Center. We did know it was an attack at the time. We were only told that a plane had hit one of the towers as people were rushing all across New York City trying to get to jobs like mine. And Katie and Matt were on the air with the Today Show. Then there was a report of a second plane hitting the other trade tower, and we understood that this was no longer the possibility of a bad aviation accident, that was very likely a terrorist attack. And then about 45 minutes later, of course, the Pentagon was hit. And we began to hear from United and American Airlines that not all of their flights could be accounted for. We did know that it was American Airlines Flight 11 that had left Boston that had hit the first tower. And then we began to hear that a flight from Newark to Los Angeles was missing in action, in effect. Also a flight from Dulles. It was that kind of a day. It was a day of surrealism and disbelief, but the cold, hard reality that this country was, in effect, in a terrorist war. The most severe attack in America since Pearl Harbor. In the eyes of a lot of people, a more devastating attack because we don't know who did it. And these were terrorists who used innocent people as weapons. Katie and Matt will be here momentarily. I'll see you again at 6:30, and we'll be on throughout the evening on this NBC station. There's so much more to come on this devastating day in America.
I spent a year in combat. I never saw anything like this. Before, a lot of people died, but nothing this devastating.
We carried a bunch of people that we found laying in the debris. There was complete darkness. We stumbled over some people. We picked them up and carried them across the street.
You could hear the rumbling. When you looked up, you could see the top of the building just fumbling.
I heard the sound of the rumble, and I ran. I heard the rumble, and I just heard the rumble, and then I ran like hell, and there was a large wind coming.
It started from the train. There was a gentleman on the cell phone who just started screaming that the planes had hit into the World Trade Center, and everyone in the car ran over to the other side, and we could see the burning and the big hole through the Trade Center. And as soon as we got out of the train station, people were screaming and crying and yelling, and it was just total chaos.
I was in the building when they announced there was a fire, and they evacuated the World Trade Center. And then when we got outside, you looked up and we saw flames and smoke. And then as we were moving away from the building, I heard, a loud explosion, and, saw the second tower caught in flames. And at that point, everybody started running.
In the second tower, it was like something went in and came out the other side, and a huge, huge fireball. And that was it. And then we left our building. We evacuated and were walking around for the last 2 hours.
I've been to Turkey, the earthquake 2 years ago in Turkey, 19,000 people died, and Bosnia and Macedonia, a number of places in the world. And this is certainly, when you start talking to a New York police officer and they start crying for what they've seen in the last couple hours, you know the seriousness and the gravity of the situation.
I was there when the tower, it just rained building, okay? And I was buried alive for 15 minutes until I scrambled out. And I'm just very concerned about the 6 firemen who were with me, because I'm not sure if they all made it.
3 hours all this can happen. 3 hours. I don't know if I was going to live or die within 3 hours. So I just thank God I am alive. So I can say. I hope my coworkers are too. Ma'am, what floor?
For those of you joining us, it is 5 o'clock Eastern Time, and you are joining a live special of NBC News on the attack on America. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt Lauer.
And I'm Katie Couric. It's been more than 8 hours since the first plane hit the World Trade Center tower this morning. We do know the devastation is unfathomable, but at this hour there is much we still do not know. For example, it is unclear how many people have died here in New York or at the Pentagon, where another jet crashed this morning as well. In Manhattan, it's believed that thousands of people may have been killed or injured, but a definitive number may not be known for days or even weeks. We do know 266 people died on board 4 airliners hijacked and turned into deadly weapons this morning.
This is the scene again right now on the southern tip of Manhattan. The twin towers of the World Trade Center have been wiped from the New York skyline. The towers collapsed within minutes of one another after the astonishing and horrifying attack early this morning. The country's financial center disappeared under a carpet of rubble, smoke, and choking clouds of dust. The size and scope of this attack, unimaginable. Within minutes of the two attacks, the World